Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me back. In this lesson, we will focus on animating the logo, but first, we need to learn about track mattes. Track mattes is an action that is very similar to the clipping mask in Photoshop and Illustrator. For example, in Illustrator, we can define the visible boundaries of the entire group. In Photoshop, we can create a texture for a text layer. But in After Effects, there are many options with which we can create super cool things for this action. In this lesson, we will learn in which situations we should use each of the track mattes. And after we understand all the possibilities, we will return to our video and apply what we have learned. So before moving on to learn about track mattes, let's prepare the pre-comp of the logo. The pre-comp of the logo already exists in the Projects panel. After Effects automatically created a pre-comp of the logo design when we imported the Illustrator file. We don't have to insert the pre-comp of the logo straight into the master comp. We can first work inside it, and only when we finish animating the logo, we will bring it into the master comp. So let's get into the pre-comp of the logo. Alright, so inside this pre-comp, we see the layers of the logo when the size of this pre-comp is the size of the original document in Illustrator. We'll press Ctrl K. And we'll see that in the settings of this pre-comp, the size is 640 by 320. Let's open this file in Illustrator and see what I mean. To find the original file on our computer, we can right-click on one of the layers of the logo, go to Reveal, and choose Reveal in Explorer. Let's open it. And here, in Illustrator, I can see the size of the document. If we click on the crop tool, we can also see the exact dimensions. 640 by 320. These are exactly the dimensions that appeared in After Effects. Let's click on the toggle switch and cancel the Shade button, because we don't need it. Great, and now we're ready to move on to learning about track mattes. Let's save the project, Ctrl S. We will close it and open the After Effects file found in the main folder of the course you downloaded from me, called Class 0 Track Mattes. Alright, so after we open the project of the lesson, I want to explain what is in this project. So first of all, there are three folders: Assets, Track Mates Animated, and Track Mates. The Assets folder contains all the assets that we will use in the lesson. There are video clips, photos, etc. In the Track Mates Animated folder, there are the animated compositions. Both folders have the same compositions, but what is inside the animated folder is an animated version of this composition. It's good because we can see what we will create in each lesson. So in the lesson, we will not work on the compositions found in the Track Mates Animated folder. We will create all the animations using the compositions here, from scratch. So, for now, you can close this folder, and we'll start with the first lesson found in the Track Mates folder. Now let's see what this composition consists of. There is a shape type layer, called Sweep. There are two balls, text, and a solid used as a background. If you don't see this panel the way I do, click here on Toggle Switch Mode. So as I mentioned before, Track Mates is an action that is very similar to clipping mask in Photoshop and Illustrator. As you can see in the example, we use a certain layer to create a mask for another layer. But in After Effects for this action, there are many options with which we can create super cool things. In this lesson, we will learn how to create a basic clipping mask in After Effects, which is called Preserve Transparency. It behaves exactly like the clipping mask in Photoshop or Illustrator. Let's say, I want the sweep layer to be visible only within the borders of the letter. as happens in the final animation. So first thing, I will place this layer here, above the layer of the letter. And now we'll click on this function called Preserve Underlying Transparency. But before we click, let's turn off the background. If you don't see the background in transparency, you can click here until you see the transparent background. Okay, so now let's click on this function. And here we do see the sweep, only within the boundaries of the letter. Let's bring back the default background of the composition, and notice if I move this layer. It is indeed within the boundaries of the letter. But if I move it here, it seems that the sweep is also within the boundaries of the blue ball. Maybe that is what we want. But if we don't want it to happen, I will explain why it happens. The setting Preserve Underlying Transparent works in such a way that all the layers that will be under it will be used as masks for this layer. If I don't want the two balls to be a mask for the sweep layer, I'll just place them above it. And now the sweep doesn't interact with the balls. If I want the blue ball to interact, I'll move it under the sweep layer. So now the sweep will be on the blue and not on the pink ball. I'll put it back up. So remember, everything that is under the layer on which we applied the definition will be used as a mask for this layer. Let's turn off the background and restore our background. As you can see, the effect we created is destroyed. I will explain why this happened. It's for the same reason I just explained. Everything under the layer we applied the definition to will be used as a mask for this layer. And the background is also under the sweep layer. If I scale it down, we will see that the sweep is disappearing. That is, the background is used as a sweep's mask. So how do we solve this problem? We can pre-comp all the layers that should integrate together as masks for layer sweep. So, select all the layers using the Shift key, press Ctrl-Shift-C, and change the name to sweep_2, because we already have such a pre-comp that I set up earlier, which is in the Track Mattes Animated folder. Click OK. As you already know, this pre-comp appears in the Projects panel as well. Let's keep the order in this panel and drag this pre-comp into the folder I made earlier, called PairComp2. So now, if we go back to our scene, we will see that the effect we wanted to create does work. That is, in this pre-comp, are now all the layers that are supposed to work together. And here, we can decide with which layers the sweep layer will interact. And if we go back to the main composition, everything will be fine and work properly, because the background is completely separated from the sweep layer. Let's use this opportunity and create a cool animation. We'll move the sweep layer here. Make sure we're at the beginning of the timeline. Press P to bring up the position parameter, create a keyframe, move forward to second 2, and move the layer here. You can turn on the default background of the composition. Now let's select the keyframes and press F9. Now we will stand on one of the keyframes, hold the Alt key and press it twice to change the velocity to 85 by 85. Press OK and check it out. Excellent! Now let's duplicate the sweep layer, Ctrl D. Move it here so it will start after the first sweep. Maybe a little more. Let's see. Cool! Now we can go back to the main composition and see the animation we created. And now let's stand with the time indicator at second 2, exactly where the animation ends, and then shorten the work area either manually or using the hotkey N. That way, we will see the animation in loop. The method of working with the preserve underlying transparency function can work in simple projects without many layers. In the next lesson, we will learn about more professional methods that will do the same thing but in slightly more complex projects. So let's open the second lesson, where we will learn about the main track mats, called Alpha Matte and Luma Matte. We will focus on, and try to understand what is the difference between them. Let's close the previous compositions. We don't need them anymore. On this side, I will demonstrate what Alpha Matte is, and on this side, what Luma Matte is. I will lock the background so that it does not bother me during the explanation. If we click the Shy button, we can see all the text that appear in the composition. I just locked and turned them off so they wouldn't disturb us in class. So there are two identical shapes, called pentagons. Both have a gradient fill. Now I'll start explaining about the Alpha Matte. The Alpha Matte function will create a mask, according to the visible pixels of the layer from which we want to make a mask. Alpha Matte does not care that this pentagon is black or white. Alpha Matte cares only about the shape and its fill only, filled with pixels. It doesn't care what color are the pixels of this shape. The main thing is that there are pixels here. And now, I want to use this shape and make the video visible only within the borders of the pentagon. There are two ways to do it. The first way is, I can go to this section called Track Mats, and select the layer I want. If I click on the small arrow, I will see all the layers that exist in this composition. Layers 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the text layers I showed you before. It's just that they are invisible in the layer panel. So the layer I need to select is the layer called Shape Alpha, because I know it's that layer. Another good reason to always name our layers. I will click on it, and the video is visible only within the borders of the pentagon. That is the layer called Shape Alpha. To undo it, I'll open the layers again and select None. I'll turn this layer back on. And now I want to talk about the second way to do it. Those using the latest version, 2023, can do the same operation, only in a much simpler way. I can grab the Track Mats pick sweep and link it into the layer I want to use. It did the same action as before. You can see it here too. We can now scale the video and move it however we like. This icon tells us that the Alpha Matte setting is activated on this layer. As you can see, there is another small box here. Let's see what happens if I click on it. An inverted alpha was created. That is, now, everything that is within the pentagon shape will not be visible to the eye. I will cancel the invert and move on to explain about the Luma Matte. So the Luma Matte function also cares a lot about the shape of the layer, but in addition to that, it also cares a lot about the dark parts and the light parts that exist in the shape. It doesn't matter what color it is. It could be dark red or light red. Luma looks at the dark pixels and the light pixels. It's dark pixels and it's light. So now, let's create a mask for this video and use a pentagon called Shape Luma. Just like before, I can drag this layer's Track Mats pick whip and link it to the layer I want to use as a mask. Now it's on the Alpha Matte, and to change it to the Luma Matte, I'll click once on the Alpha icon. And now the icon has changed to the Luma Matte icon. And if we look at the video, it seems that there are parts that we see from the video, and there are parts that we don't. The parts we see are the bright parts of the pentagon. If I open the gradient of this shape and change the position of the dark part, which is here, and drag the black color here, another area will disappear from the video. If I turn the pentagon back on, we will see that it is indeed the dark part of this layer. That is, everything that is under the dark pixels will not be visible. And of course, we can also make the Luma invert. That is, everything that will be under the dark pixels will be visible. I'll turn off the background so we can see it a little better. So everything that is within the pentagon's borders is affected in some way. Everything that is within the boundaries of the bright pixels is not visible. And everything under the dark pixels is visible. I'll cancel the invert, restore the background, and we'll move on to the next lesson. In it, we will see in which situations the Alpha and Luma definitions will help us. Let's start with examples of Alpha Matte. So let's enter the third lesson, close the second lesson and open the third lesson from here as well, to see what we will create now. We'll create a cool animation that looks like this. There are many ways to create animations of this type, but the fastest and smartest way would be with the Alpha Matte setting. Okay, so let's go back to our lesson and see how we do it. First things first, let's see what we have in the scene. There is a black square here, called Shape Matte, because it will be the layer we will use as a mask for the letters. There is a text layer of the letter A and the letter B. There is also a background that we will lock right now, so that it doesn't get in the way. We can close it for now. Before I start, I'll click here on the empty area and press the apostrophe key to bring out the grid, so I can see where the center of the composition is. And now, I can start the animation. So first thing, I will move the black square to the center. Turn off the layer of the letter B. And move the letter A here, to the center. And now, I want the letter A to be visible only within the borders of the black square. For this, I need to set the letter A as the alpha of the black square. So I'll grab the pick whip from here, and drag it to the black square's layer. Great! The letter A is indeed visible within the borders of the black square. That is, when the letter A is within the square's boundaries, I will see it. If it is outside the square, then I will not see it. Let's place the letter inside the black square. And if I press invert here, then obviously, now when the letter A is within the borders of the black square, I won't see it, and when the letter A is outside the borders of the square, I will see it. Just reminding you about the invert option, because we will use it soon. Okay, now I will cancel the invert and create an animation for the letter A. I will place the letter here. Select the layer and press P to get the position parameter, because this is the parameter I will animate. So at this point in time, second 0, I create a keyframe and say to the letter, you will stand here. Now I will move forward to second 1 and tell the letter to stay here, until we do not see it completely. Let's see what we got. Now I'll turn on the letter B layer and change its visibility relative to the scene. That is, now I want to make the letter B be visible when it is outside the square. The opposite of what we did with the letter A. Let's see how to do it. First of all, I will place the letter here. And now, I will use the layer of the black square once again to make the letter B visible in one place, and not visible in another. So I'm going to grab the Track Matte's pick whip of the letter B, and drag it to the layer of the square as well. Apparently, I don't see the letter, because it is outside the square's boundaries. If I want to see the letter when it is out of square, then I have to invert the Alpha Matte. Now when the letter B is within the square's boundaries, I will not see it, and when it is outside the square, I will see it. And now what's left is to animate the letter B. Let's see how we can do it smartly. I want the letter B to move together with the letter A, but without creating keyframes for the letter B. How can I do that? With the help of parenting, of course. So first of all, I will make sure that the letter B is in the same position as the letter A, which is about here. And now I'll parent it to the letter A. It is important to distinguish between the two parenting icons. Here is the parenting of the layers, and here is the parenting of the track mats. So I will take the parenting of layer B and drag it to A. Now wherever the letter A moves, B moves along with it. I remind you again that we don't see the letter B because it is set as an inverted alpha of the square. This means that as soon as the letters move to the side, the letter A will start to disappear because the letter A is the alpha of the square, meaning that when it leaves the borders of the square, it will not be visible. And the letter B will begin revealed because it is the inverted alpha of the square. And now, what remains to be done is to change the keyframes to easy ease, using the F9 key, double-click while holding Alt, and change the velocity 95 to 95. Let's see how it looks. Looking great. Now let's animate the letters back to their first position. I will stand at this point in time, second 2, and copy the first keyframe. Ctrl-C, and paste it here. Ctrl-V. Let's check in the graph editor that the animation continues behaving similarly. Let's see how it looks. Excellent. Now you can place the work area at the end of the animation to see the animation in a loop. It's a cool example of using the alpha matte settings with the regular alpha and inverted. That's it, we're done, and now we'll move on to the fourth lesson. We will open the composition of the fourth lesson. You can close these two compositions. And now, let's open the fourth lesson from here, so that we can see what we are going to create. As you can see, the deer's layer is used as an alpha for more than one layer, both for the video layer with the C view, and for the text layer, which moves from right to left. Okay. So we can close the folder and get to the lesson's composition. Let's see what this composition consists of. There is a picture of a mountain deer. It's a picture without a background, as you can see. I will use this layer as a mask for other layers in the composition. There is a text layer here. Here is a video of this winter landscape. And there is a shape layer. If I turn off the video, we will see that this is an orange ball. And finally, there is also a gray background here, which I'll lock right now so it won't bother me later. So let's get started and make the video visible within the borders of the deer. I will place the video layer below the deer layer. It has no special meaning. I just do it for convenience. I remind you, if you don't see the track matte settings, click here. Let's drag the pick whip of the track mats to the deer's layer. And now, we have created a mask for the video. The shape of the mask is the shape of the deer. If I turn off the background, we can see that this is indeed the case. Now I'll zoom out a bit and place the video in the location I want. I can scale it up and create an interesting frame. Maybe something like that. Now I will turn on the layer of the ball. It looks cool. And now, I want the layer of the text to be within the shape of the deer. It's very simple. I'll take the track mate's pick whip off this layer and drag it to the layer of the deer as well. As you can see, nothing happened. Why? Because the layer of the text is below the layer of the video. I have to place the layer of the text above the layer of the video. And now all that's left is to animate the text. I will place the text layer here, reach the beginning of the timeline. Open the position parameter, create a keyframe here, reach the 10th second, and move the text layer here. And now we have two layers that use the shape of the deer as the alpha matte. That's all for this lesson. Let's move on to the next one. So let's open the next lesson. We can close all of these, and we'll also open this lesson from here to see what we're going to create. We will reveal the video, using the text layer as alpha matte. Okay, so you can close this folder and enter the composition of the lesson. In this composition, we have a text layer, no matter what color. There is a video and a gray background. So as we learned earlier, you just need to drag the pick whip to the text layer. And now we can animate the text. Do not animate the video. If we animate the video, the effect I'm looking for will not be created. We animating the text. So let's do it. Reach the beginning of the timeline, press S to open the scale parameter. Now create a keyframe. We can move forward to the second 8 and increase the text layer. But now, for the effect to work, this layer needs to be in the center of the frame. So I probably need to move this layer up. If I move the layer up, the layer's position will change, which means that, when I get to the beginning of the animation, I will see that the layer is not in the center. We need to animate the position parameter and adjust the timing according to the scale animation. Press Shift P. And at this point in time, when the text is located here, we will create a keyframe. And in the second 8, I want to move the text layer up here. I'm holding the Shift key while doing it so. So now I have to adjust the two animations, increasing the text even more and moving it here. You can increase it a little more and move it again, just a little. So what happened is, we scaled the text and moved it to the place where it should be. And now, there is both a scale and a position animation are synchronized together. So now, we can ease the keyframes. And this time, we'll use the graph editor. Make sure we're on the speed graph. Grab those two keyframes and drag their handles here. So the animation starts slowly and towards the end, increases the speed. Now let's add a subtitle to the scene. I will get to the beginning of the animation, so I get an empty space here to create a new text layer. I will select the text tool and type, Cool Title. I will select the layer, reduce the font size to 60. Change the color to white and place the text in the center, with the help of the Align tool. You can find it on Windows for those who do not see this panel. Now I remember to go back to the Selection tool, and, as we learned, I'll drag the pick whip of the subtitle to the main title. Great! What happens is that a subtitle is revealed according to the boundaries of the title. If I turn off the background, we can see that the subtitle uses the title as a mask. Now what's left is to raise the subtitle a bit so that we don't see it at first. Now we can't see it because it is outside the boundaries of the text. And when the text reaches the point where the subtitle is, we will start to see the subtitle. Alright, let's bring the background back and see what we got. That's the end of the 5th lesson. In the next one, we will learn about the Luma Matte and see in which situations we should use it. So let's click on the 6th lesson and close these compositions. We will also open the 6th lesson from here, to see what we will create. So the simplest use of Luma Matte is to create cool textures for certain layers. For example, creating a texture for a text layer. If I turn off the background, we can see that the text is actually full of holes. For example, if I draw a circle here and place it behind, we can see that the text has holes. The cool thing about it is that we can animate the texture. And this is what we will create now. Alright, so let's close the folder here, and return to the composition of the lesson. Let's see what we got here. It is a pink text layer, and there is also a large image with an interesting texture with dark and light pixel data. As we learned, if we use the Luma Matte, then the light and dark pixels have meaning. The Luma Matte removes the dark ones and leaves the light ones. Let's see what I mean. Note that it doesn't matter to us whether the layer we use is above or below the text. Now we will take the pick whip of the text layer and link it to the texture image. Apparently, nothing happened because now it is set to the Alpha Matte. As we learned, we need to click here to change the setting to Luma Matte. So now we can barely see the text. Why? This happens because there needs to be more contrast between the dark and light pixels. The pixels or the bright parts in the texture are not really bright. As we can see, they are pretty gray. We can make them brighter with the levels effect. Let's open the Effects and Presets panel and search for Levels. Now, drag the effect into the image layer and adjust the parameters. We can turn on the layer for now, just to see what we are doing. Okay, so now, let's move this arrow here, and this arrow here, to make the dark parts darker and the light parts lighter. And if we turn off the layer of the texture, a change starts to happen. And so, we have to keep playing with the settings of the levels effect until we reach something we are happy with. You can move the layer of the texture and find a point where there is a more interesting texture. In our case, let's place it in the center, because we will animate the layer of the texture soon. Let's zoom out a bit in preview and scale down the layer a bit. I'll grab this corner, and while holding Shift, drag it over here. And now, I will teach you how to animate this texture. The first thing we need to animate is the position parameter. Press P to open the position parameter, and create the first keyframe at the beginning of the timeline. Now we need to move at least 4 frames, not 4 seconds, 4 frames. And move the layer of the texture here. We'll move forward another 4 frames and this time, move the layer here, not here because the layer of the texture will go outside the borders of the text. We can zoom in a bit on the timeline, move forward 4 frames again, and move the layer here. Remember that we can move forward in frames with the help of a shortcut, Ctrl, and the right arrow. So, hold the Ctrl key and press the right arrow key 4 times. Now move the layer here. Again, I will press Ctrl and right arrow 4 times, and move the layer here. Repeat this procedure at least 2 more times. Let's see how it looks. Nice. So the texture does move, but I want it to move in a blocky way and not smoothly. It can be done in the following way. We will select all the keyframes. Right-click on one of the keyframes, and select Toggle Hold Keyframes. That will change the keyframe's behavior from smooth movement to blocky. Let's see how it looks. If we want to slow down the animation we created, then we can select all the keyframes, hold the Alt key on the keyboard, grab the last keyframe and drag it where we want. That way, the animation will be slower. If we move the keyframes here, then the animation will be faster. I prefer the animation to be slower, for example, 2 seconds. So I'll stand with the time indicator at second number 2, and again, I'll hold the Alt key, grab the last keyframe and drag them while I also hold the Shift key. That way, the last keyframe will snap to the time indicator. Let's see how it looks. Looking great. But as you can see, after the last keyframe, the animation stops. And I don't want to start copying and pasting all the keyframes along the entire timeline. What I can do is create an expression. Expression is a code operation with which we produce various animations without using keyframes. And that is exactly what we will do now. Instead of copying the keyframes of the layers positioned throughout the timeline, we will use an expression that will make our keyframes play in an infinite loop. So just follow me and enjoy our creation. So, first of all, to activate the expression, we need to hold the Alt key on the keyboard and press the stopwatch of the parameter for which we created the keyframes. In our case, it is a position parameter. So let's hold Alt and click the stopwatch. And now, let's go to the small arrow here, go to Properties, and select this expression, Loop Out Cycle. And to finish the action, we need to click somewhere in the panel. Let's click here. And now, after the end of the keyframe, the animation continues. The expression makes the keyframes repeat themselves all the time. Remember, to slow down the texture animation, we need to stand with the time indicator on the right time code. For example, all this animation will be for 1 second, and not 2 seconds. Now, we will select all the keyframes, hold Alt, grab the last keyframe and drag it to the time indicator while holding the Shift key as well. Let's see what we got. Looks great. And if I turn off the background, we will see an actual texture on a text layer. If I create a shape here and place it behind the text, it looks like the text has indeed become perforated. Alright, let's go back to the Projects panel and open the 7th lesson. Also, enter the animated version of this lesson to see what we are going to create. In this lesson, we will learn how to combine 2 layers using Luma Matte and create interesting frames like this one. We will repeat the previous lesson and animate the texture of the orange ball. So let's close the folder, return to the composition of the 7th lesson and quickly go over what this composition is made of. So of course, we have a background that we can lock right now. Here is the image of the texture, a shaped layer of an orange ball, a video of the landscape, and the image of the deer. Let's start by repeating what we learned in the previous lesson and animate the texture. Turn on the texture and ball layer, and put them into pre-comp right now to keep the project organized. Press Ctrl-Shift-C and change the name to 7_textured sphere_2. 2 because I already have a pre-comp with this name that I created earlier. Click OK, and now we can see this composition in the project panel. I will also put it in this folder to keep the order in the project panel. Now let's enter the pre-comp we created. You can place it here. And now, let's create the same animation we created in the previous lesson to practice. Place the background on top. Take the pick whip of the layer of the ball and link it to the texture. Click here once to change the matte from Alpha to Luma. And again, because there is not enough contrast between the dark and light parts, we hardly see anything. So we'll select the texture layer and drag the levels effect into it. Now we will adjust the arrows here, until we reach a result that we feel good about. Something like that. And this time, let's create the animation using the rotation parameter instead of position. Select the layer of the texture, press R to open the rotation parameter, and create a keyframe at the beginning of the timeline. With the help of Ctrl and the right arrow, move forward 4 frames and rotate the layer in this way. Continue to do this operation several times. In every keyframe, we try to rotate the texture so that we notice a difference in its visibility. To make it more interesting, we can press Shift-P and animate the position parameter as well. This will create a slightly more interesting movement. Okay, so now you can turn all keyframes into toggle hold keyframes. And finally, we will create an expression for the 2 parameters. Hold the Alt key and click on the stopwatch. Open the expression library, go to Properties and select the expression called Loop Out Cycle. Do the same for the rotation parameter. Let's see how it looks. Looks great. Now we can go back to the main composition and continue the lesson. Now I want to do a small reminder on working with precomps. For example, as you can see, the size of the precomp is large, and there are unnecessary empty areas here. So let's remember how we can rescale the precomp. First of all, we need to go back into the precomp. Press Ctrl-K to get the settings of this precomp, and change the size of this precomp to 1080 by 1080. Press OK and return to the main composition. And here we can see that now this precomp is cropped. So after we created the ball with the texture, we can turn on the video layer and the deer layer. Okay, and now let's use the deer layer, which will be the matte of the video layer. That is to say, we will see the video only within the boundaries of the deer's layer. Let's find an interesting frame by moving the video here. Something like that. And now we will change the matte to Luma. And again, because of the lack of contrast between the dark and light pixels, we can barely see the layer. I will explain. After all, the deer's layer also has light and dark parts, but they are not contrasting enough for the Luma to be able to read them well. Therefore, we can use the levels effect on the deer's layer and adjust the effects parameters until we reach a point where the contrast between the dark and light parts will be greater. Let's move this parameter and see how it looks. Let's turn off the precomp of the ball for now. And now, we just have to play with the parameters of the effect until we reach the result we like. Okay, an interesting frame is starting to form. We can see both the deer and the video. But if I turn the ball back on, we'll see that we can barely see the deer. Because the Luma erases the dark parts, remember. So what can be done in such a situation? I have a great solution for you. What we need to do is duplicate the deer. Ctrl-D. delete the level effect from the new layer, and add the effect called fill on it. Now we will change the color to black and place this layer below the video. And with that, we created a fill for the deleted areas. What's cool about this method is that now we can change the color to any other color and thus change the design. You can also sample the color of the background. In our case, this is the best option, in my opinion. And now, let's see what problem we can encounter in such situations. If I move the deer somewhere, then the second layer will stay in place, and it can ruin my design. This is not what I want. What we need to do in such a situation is to connect the two layers. So I will select the duplicated layer of the deer and parent the layer to the original layer of the deer. So now, if I move the original layer, the duplicated layer will move along with it. And if I want the video to move along with them, then I can parent the video layer to the original layer of the deer as well. That way, when I move this layer, everything will move with it. With this, we have finished the 7th lesson, and we are ready to move on to the 8th and last lesson. Let's go back to the projects panel and open the last lesson. We can close it all and open this lesson when it's already animated. So we're going to create a really cool transition using the track mattes methods, which we learned in the previous lessons. So let's close this folder, return to the composition of the lesson, and see what it is made of. You can also close the effects panel. So what we have here is a layer that is actually a video of black ink being spilled on a white background. I notice that I don't see the borders of the layers. If it's happened to you, then you can simply press the keyboard shortcut Ctrl-Shift-H. I did not see those boundaries. I'll do it again so you can see what I mean. Alright, so once again, there is a layer of video of black ink being spilled on a white background. That means there are dark pixels and light pixels. I will bring the layer to its original state. Besides this layer, here is the video of the landscape. Let's increase it like so. Here we also have a simple text layer and a gray background. Okay, now I want to see the video disappearing, as it reveals the text. Let's see how to do it. So first thing, let's use the ink video layer as the matte for the landscape. Now let's change the matte from Alpha Matte to Luma Matte. Click here. Now, let's turn off the background to understand what is happening now. Everything in black would disappear, and everything in white will be seen. This is how the Luma Matte works. And that's how the transition is created. You can turn a transition into an exposure transition using the invert button. If I turn on the invert, now everything in white will not be visible. And everything in black will be visible. This creates an exposure transition. That is, we reveal the landscape and do not hide it. Okay, let's cancel the invert and continue with the lesson. Let's turn on the text in the background and add a cool effect called glow on the text. Change the radius to 60. And that's how we created a really cool transition. And now, I want to talk about the problems using ink videos. As you can see at the end of the animation, The transition is cut incorrectly because the video of the ink ends. To solve this problem, we can animate the opacity parameter for the ink video so that it will disappear more nicely. So let's stand at this point in time, that is, a few seconds before the ink video ends. Select the ink layer and press T to open the opacity parameter. Create a keyframe of 100% opacity. Move forward to the end of the layer and set the opacity to 0%. That means the video will start to disappear from here. Or we can decide that the disappearance will start here, which will be a little faster. Let's select the keyframes, and press F9 to turn them into Easy Ease keyframes. Now the video disappears more pleasantly. Remember, if we click on the invert, we will hide the text and not reveal it. I will cancel the invert. Okay, and that's it. We've finished everything there is to learn about track mattes, Alpha and Luma, and now we're ready to go back and apply the new knowledge to our project. So let's press Ctrl S to save this one. And now, go to File, Open Project. Go to the folder you created for the course and open the After Effects file you created, called Class 0. Let's animate the logo using our new knowledge. We will start by animating the text layers of the logo. So we will first create the shapes that will serve as masks for the text layers. Select the rectangle tool. Ensure no layer is selected. And create one square for this layer. Let's turn this layer off for a moment. Move this layer down and rename it to Geographic. And the name of this layer will be changed to Visual. So this square will serve as a mask for the visual text layer. And so, we will change the name to Shape Visual. And now, we will create a square that will be used as a mask for the second text layer. So we'll make sure that no layer is selected, create a square. Move it here. And change the name to Shape Geographic. Great! So we have two squares, and now we are ready to define the mattes. First of all, we want to see the track matte settings, so that we will click here, and now I will grab the pick whip of this layer and drag on this square. Now we will take the pick whip of this layer and drag it on this square. Excellent! Now we can select both text layers and animate them. Let's select this layer, hold the Ctrl key and select this layer as well. Let's get a little closer to the timeline. And now, we will animate it from the end to the beginning. Because I know that the text animation should end when it is in the place where it is right now. So let's move forward, for example, 2 seconds, press P to open the position parameter, and create keyframes for both layers. Now let's get to the beginning of the timeline, select the selection tool, and move the 2 layers down here, while holding the Shift key. Let's see how it looks. Excellent! Now let's select all the keyframes and change them to Easy Ease. Press F9. Finally, let's double-click on one of the keyframes while holding the Alt key and change the velocity to 85 by 85, then click OK. Now let's create a scale animation for the icon. And again, I know that the icon's animation should end when it is in its current state, So let's move forward to second 2. We can tag this layer in a different color to make it convenient for us to work. Press S to open the scale parameter. So in second 2, the size will be 100, the current size, and in second 0, the scale will be 0. Now let's select all the keyframes and change them to easy ease. Finally, let's double-click on one of the keyframes while holding the Alt key and change the velocity to 85 by 85, then click OK. Let's turn on the background. The background is black, so we don't see the text. It's not a problem. Let's press Ctrl K and change the color of the background to a neutral color. Maybe something like that. And now, we will create a delay between all the layers to create a cooler animation. So let's say that after the icon comes out, at this point in time, the word visual will start to appear, and only after that the word geographic will appear. Let's see how it looks. It is too much. Let's adjust it a little bit more. But before that, let's place this layer above, just so that it is convenient for us to see the delay in this panel as well. And now, let's try to find the perfect delay by moving the layers and checking how it looks. Okay, it looks a lot better now. And after we're done with the animation, press Ctrl S to save everything we've done so far. And we'll go back to Master Comp. So that's the end of the lesson. In the next lesson, we'll continue working on the video, and we'll practice track mattes once again while creating the cool cell phone transition. And of course, many other cool things. But before that, I highly recommend taking a 10-minute break. Get up from your chair, do some light stretches, make some tea or coffee, and come back refreshed for the next part. See you in the next class.